Welcome to the Arch Street Meeting House and Burial Ground. This property has been actively and continuously used by Quakers and the Philadelphia community since it was given to the Religious Society of Friends, Quakers, by William Penn in 1701.
Simply put, Quakers are a Christian denomination, founded in England in the mid-17th century by George Fox, with no formal creed, liturgy, or priesthood, and rejects all violence in human relations, especially warfare. Now, we're going to talk about the building a little later, but for now, let's focus on the burial ground portion of this remarkable property. Any guesses as to where the graves are? They are all over the grounds within this brick wall. The first burial took place in 1683. Mary Lloyd was the first, though now it is estimated that over 20,000 people are buried on these grounds. Few stone markers remain, but markers weren't commonplace in Quaker burials. Coffins were not widely used either, even for other faiths. There would be quite an expense in having even the simplest wooden box made for burial. In fact, the practice of using coffins does not become commonplace until the Civil War. 1861, coffins were used to transport fallen soldiers from the battlefield to be buried at home. Burials on the same grounds, or even under places of worship, is not unique to Quakers. Right here in Old City, there are graves surrounding Old St. Mary's and Christ Church. In those communities, graves on church grounds were generally saved for leaders or wealthy members of those communities. Again, expense plays a part. A burial plot anywhere is going to be expensive. Here at Arch Street, the burial grounds were open to anyone who needed a resting place. All were welcome here. Though this open-door policy was pushed to its limits in 1793. Yellow fever hit Philadelphia in August of 1793. People got sick and died very quickly. Ultimately, between August and October of 1793, about 10,000 people had died. Where to bury them? There were mass graves in places like Washington Square, and many people who died of yellow fever were buried here on Arch Street's burial grounds. Here is a gruesome account of what took place in 1793. The terrible smell, as well as the infectiousness of the dying, meant quick burials. The bodies of non-Quakers, as well as friends, were sometimes heaved over the walls. Monthly meeting minutes from January of 1794 report that the old ground was so full that they did not think it advisable to continue to bury there longer. For indeed, Arch Street Meeting House had ended up with not just rows, but layers of bodies. These grounds were pushed to their capacity in 1794. Rather than having the grounds sit unused, it's determined that a monthly meeting building will be put here in order to better accommodate the community and the yearly meeting. The wall you see surrounding the burial ground was originally 4 feet high, and it was increased to its present 9-foot height before the meeting house was built. The last burial here was in 1880. The Arch Street Meeting House was built by Philadelphia carpenter and builder Owen Biddle, a member of the Carpenters Company of Philadelphia. Biddle also wrote The Young Carpenter's Assistant, one of the earliest books on architecture written in America. Generally speaking, Quaker meeting houses are 2-story wood-frame buildings with 2 separate entrances at the front of the building, a large first-floor meeting space with benches, and an interior 2nd-story gallery. Meeting houses carry the Quaker ideals of simplicity, plainness, and equality. Arch Street Meeting House is no exception. Known for their utilitarian design and minimal detail or ornamentation, meeting houses typically blend into the environment by using local materials and construction practices. The red brick is part of that tradition. Brick is widely used in Philadelphia as part of William Penn's plan for the city. Wide streets and brick buildings for an aesthetic appeal and fire prevention. The first phase of building Arch Street Meeting House began in 1803 to 1804 with the East Room. The building was completed with the addition of the West Room in 1810 to 1811. Original and rare architectural features have been preserved. Many windows still contain panes of crown glass imported from England. Arch Street Meeting House has been a gathering place for Quakers for over 200 years and is still actively used today. Think someone in your family is buried at Arch Street Meeting House? While we don't have this material on site, most records relating to Philadelphia area Quakers are stored at Friends Historical Library at Swarthmore College, or in the Quaker Collection at Haverford College. In addition, Ancestry.com has digitized Quaker records, which makes searching for family members a cinch.
Welcome to the West Room. The East Room, where we will go next, was actually built first. Sadly, Owen Biddle died in 1806 before he could finish the final designs and oversee construction of this wing here. Mr. Biddle is buried outside in the burial grounds. Quakers believe in simplicity to avoid distraction. The services are called meetings. No one is in charge of the meetings. There's no officiant, no pastor or preacher. Quakers sit in silence for up to an hour. No one speaks unless they are moved or compelled to by the Spirit. Quakers believe in equality, so anyone can speak, including women and children.
The benches and their cushions are original to the space, and in many cases predate the building. The oldest bench is from 1683. And there are a couple of different styles that reflect the different time periods and the different meeting houses they once came from. The cushions are traditional horsehair cushions. Of course, there was no electricity when this building was completed. The main body of the building faces south, and the sun enters the south-facing windows, not just in the morning, but throughout the day.
Here at the south end, you'll notice a curved board. It's called the sounding board. And when standing underneath it, the speaker's voice is amplified so everyone can hear. Let's consider the seating arrangement. Of course, today, people can sit wherever they're most comfortable, but that wasn't always the case. Around the top of the room, you have the balconies, which are the youth galleries. These three-sided balconies were intended primarily for children ages 16 and under. The youth gallery was partitioned here in the north balcony. It separated the boys and the girls. Each corner is being served by a stairway. There is evidence of these young Quakers in the form of penknife carvings on benches in the youth gallery. There is a modesty panel along the stairway in the girls' balcony. This was meant to ensure a young girl's ankles were not exposed as she climbed the stairs to the balcony. Here on the main floor, men sat to the west and women to the east. The separation of men and women were common among many faiths. But here at the Arch Street Meeting House, they practiced another form of separate seating. Can you take a guess at who was asked to sit somewhere specific? Yes, African Americans. A community that fought against slavery and banned enslavement of others for its own members in 1774, practiced segregation for worship. African Americans were asked to sit under the stairs or on a back bench in the North Gallery. In 1837, a Black Quaker named Sarah Douglas spoke out against this segregation. Here is a part of a letter that she wrote about her own experiences. And as you request to know, particularly about Arch Street Meeting, I may say that the experience of years had made me wise to this fact, that there is a bench set apart at that meeting for our people. Whether officially appointed or not, I cannot say. But this I am free to say, that my mother and myself were told to sit there, and that a friend sat on each end of the bench to prevent white persons from sitting there. And even when a child, my soul was made sad with hearing 5 or 6 times during the course of one meeting this language of remonstrance addressed to those who were willing to sit by us. This bench is for the Black people. This bench is for the people of color. I have not been in Arch Street meeting for 4 years, but my mother goes once a week. And frequently, she has a whole long bench to herself. In another account, Sarah says, "I have frequently heard my mother say that very many of our people are inclined to Friends' mode of worship. She lamented the unchristian conduct that kept them out. Some have gone out from Friends, not because they prefer their own meetings, where they regularly hear singing and preaching, but because they could not bear the cross of sitting on the Black bench." We do know of 2 women who sat with Sarah's mother, Grace, the Grimke sisters, Sarah and Angelina. They were abolitionists and advocates for women's rights. Change did not come until the 20th century. It took a few enlightened individuals to speak out against the unconscious discrimination that was keeping African Americans from Friends. In the early 1930s, Henry Cadbury asked Friends to look at their racial attitudes. He wrote articles, books, and held workshops to bring change. At full capacity, this room seats 1,200 people. It would have been filled for monthly and yearly meetings that took place here, for worship and community events. Commerce and business were discussed. 200 years, and the congregation that still meets here meets in a smaller room just behind those doors. This room is used for weddings, graduations, community events, and presentations, and for people like you who come here to discover its history.
This is the East Room, completed in 1804 before the West Room, where we just came from. As you can see, both rooms are pretty much mirror images of one another. Once both rooms were completed, men and women could meet separately at yearly meetings in order to discuss business and other concerns of the community. Today, we use it as an exhibition space.
This exhibit highlights the Quakers who fought for freedom, peace, and equality. Here you'll find stories of Quakers who fought to abolish slavery, Quakers who refused to support war efforts, and who created nonviolent forms of protest. You'll hear stories of Quaker women, like Lucretia Mott, who fought for women's voting rights.
The fight for freedom, peace, and equality continues here at Arch Street Meeting House. In 1972, together with Arch Street Meeting House, the House of Umoja, the Swahili word for unity, sponsored the Peace Conference to stop gang violence here in Philadelphia. As a result, nearly 400 gang members signed a treaty of Imani, peace. Now, the treaty was allotted almost 60 days before goaded into violence by Police Commissioner Frank Rizzo.
During the Occupy movement in Philly in 2011, Arch Street Meeting House provided refuge and support for Occupy demonstrators. 200 years of community that is still alive today.
200 years of worship, faith, and fellowship.
200 years of gathering to discuss social issues like climate crisis, economic injustice, immigration, and peace.